Hello. Um, I wanted to take a moment or a few minutes of your time to talk about my struggle with my abusive father. And at first, when you're a kid, you don't really think about how your dad is abusive. You see people around you who tell you need to have a relationship with your father because he loves you, and you have to have it because he had you, and having that is not giving him that is an insult to what he worked for to do that. But to bring up a couple things, I am no longer in contact with him. I cut him off about more than 24 hours ago, but it's been a long time coming is what I'm going to say. But before I continue, there's a couple things I want to say. I don't need any validation or reassurance. I'm fine, and this is something I've been trying to cope with for a long time. I just want to help people understand my situation and help those that might be in the same situation I've been in for a long time. Another reason is, regardless or not if you agree with me or not in my decision, please respect my right to make this decision. This is not a rebellious phrase or me screaming for some kind of attention. It's me for coming with the terms of the fact that my dad is toxic for me and needs to be finally let out of my life. You see, I've been in denial about my father's abuse for most of my life. It's really hard to see that your father is mentally abusive when you see people that have it way worse. One of the things I remember in my childhood is when I was 12 years old. I had met a girl in my neighborhood who was physically abused by her family. We started becoming friends, and I went over to her house one day only to watch her get grabbed by the throat by her dad while he would maintain a casual conversation with me and her little siblings. As a 12-year-old girl at the time, I had thought she was getting punishment, as there was a spat between the dad and the daughter before. But I had been naive. I didn't think of it all the time. At the time, but what I saw was definitely abuse, and it was because of that small hand in my body that made me think it was okay for my dad to sometimes lay some kind of finger on me because I deserved it. However, as years went by and I hit high school, I started expressing myself a lot more. I wore clothes that weren't really his preference, and he would take every opportunity to insult me and my clothing choice, telling me my outfit showed too much skin or I was giving out more attention to people who didn't need it. I didn't know if it was sexualizing, but whether or not it is or is irrelevant at this point. There's nothing that changes the fact that my father insulted me the way I expressed myself on a daily basis. Then, at the age of 15, he had a heart attack. He always had health issues. He didn't go to a doctor regularly like my mom and I did. Though it was clear when my dad got home from the hospital and had been stressed out, been consistently in and out, that he had been getting worse. My mom and I were constantly stressed. We always rubbed my father the wrong way, and when we proved him wrong, he would just proceed to bring both of us down even more. I don't even know how my mother survived so long with my dad, but that might come with her past and the heart that I inherited from her. Still, though, even though knowing my father had been so rude and nasty, I always excused his actions. No one would believe that my hard-working father, who was working on cars even when he was still on oxygen, was mentally abusing his family behind the scenes. My best friend Cheyenne, who I've known for years, was the first person to approach me about the abuse. Cheyenne had seen the warning signs far longer than anyone else did in my life. I told her that it was okay, that my dad only had wanted what was best for me. She, however, knew how my heart was. She had seen me at my worst consistently. She had seen me broken and in tears. She'd seen my heart stomped on and heard me cry over the bullies in my elementary and middle school that would constantly harass me on a daily basis at my private school. She's heard me talk when I was 11 years old about how I wanted to commit suicide and just die after I was sexually abused by a 14-year-old kid in our neighborhood. I was only 11 years old at the time. However, even with her words, she didn't convince me that my father was mentally abusive. I've always had that heart for forgiving people, but I always had that self-hate that had developed throughout my years of being bullied. So I thought it was fair, but because a lot of people cared about me anyways. Many people hated me when I was in elementary and middle school, so I had developed a lot of my negative views of myself and paranoia as a result of my bullying and constant negative environment. My adult years didn't help either. After graduation and starting my first year at college, things just got worse and worse. Even though my father had open heart surgery and had medication now, it still didn't stop the onslaught of his bone-piercing words that would envelop my body on a near-daily basis. My voices in my head weren't so kind either. They were eating me up, telling me that I had no chance to become a normal adult because I didn't have a car nor a license at the age of 18. Thankfully, I was resilient. I kept fighting the voices in my head that wouldn't keep quiet and would keep me up at nights where I would have to work in the morning way early. My father had time and time again tried to prolong my time on getting my license. When he took me driving, he would just yell and yell and yell, and it always set me in an orbit. Finally, times went by, and he decided he was no longer going to take me to school or work anymore. I remember fighting out with my mom over the phone consistently, trying to get her to tell me to let me get a license test scheduled, but she hadn't budged a bit. My father hadn't either, but I was 19 years old then, and I was fed up with my family's constant sheltering tactics and trying to control me. I had bought my first car a month before, so I knew that there was a chance. Finally, my mom and I stopped fighting and told me to make an appointment, and I did, and I passed. Most people think I would have been able to get rid of my dad's constant mental abuse, but I didn't. Sure, having a license, going to school, and working keeps you busy, but it never really did stop the abusive words from pouring down on me. He would justify his abuse by threatening to take my car, threatening not to work on it, and trying to remind me who was in control whenever we had a disagreement. He'd also guilt-trip me consistently when I didn't want to go to church, as I started to stray away from the Catholic Church as a whole. Then came 2017. I was 20 years old, and it was about to transfer to a community college into a university. I had gotten very involved with the LGBT plus community, and my dad, who was a Bible-thumping Catholic conservative that would rip my tongue out if he ever thought I wasn't straight, had found out in June that I was going into a pride parade. That was the last night I would ever be living. That was the last night I would be ever living there. A surge of words had been exchanged, and the tension had risen over the levels of stable, leading my dad to hitting me with his cane. That had been it. After 5 hours with one of my best friends, I had grabbed only a few things and moved into my grandma's house for the next 2 months before I moved in. My father had gaslighted me over the phone consistently, and my mom was begging me to come back and make things the way they were. When I left that house on June 23rd, 2017, I knew that there had been a reason, and that reason was to get out of my family's hold. Those months forward had been the most out of place I had ever been in my life. I didn't know what to do. I was lost. But my grandma and so many others pulled me out of the rubble when I had needed it the most. Words cannot describe how grateful I am to all of them. However, my father had gotten worse and worse after I somewhat fixed our relationship, but I learned the hard way I shouldn't let him in after what he did to me. He had now found someone to believe in, something that honestly made me laugh, but it was the start of his judgment from coming out. He was ready to tell me people are going to pay for their sins, myself included, and told me that it was God's will, and he told me to turn back. But like a few months back, I was resilient. I was volunteering in campaigns that I put my trust in. Saw people that I'd never seen in a million years, that had been my idols since the 2016 election a few days ago. And here comes the last straw with my father. August 7th, 2018. Primary day in my state. The day I'm rating this. The guy I had been supporting was a man that was a Muslim doctor. I had met that guy 3 times, and Bernie Sanders had been in the state of Michigan to support him. Of course, some reporter had used my picture at the rally, and that had happened 2 weeks prior, and my dad had unfortunately found out about it. On the day when I just wanted to make my mom and brother better, my dad had come to burn that kingdom down. He had confronted me about my choice for the governor of Michigan, telling me that a Muslim had no right to be in office. He came because he believes in a fake Bible. And he also kept saying that I was supporting the enemy of people and that it wasn't going with our religion. He goes on to say that he's way older than me and therefore knows better automatically. Then I snapped. I started yelling at him at the reason why I left, giving him hard facts to him, and told him that he's becoming like his abusive mother. He kept gaslighting me consistently every time I brought out the hard facts of him and his abuse. And finally, I was done. I got all my stuff and outright left. I was done with him gaslighting me, and I was done with him hurting me constantly. But most of all, I was mad that he was the first man to ever break me, even long before I was sexually assaulted, even long before I even dated. I was mad that he pushed me to attempt suicide twice. I was mad that he kept hurting my brother and my mother so consistently and screwed all of our lives up. Most of all, I want to let every single one of you know that you're not alone. This is why I'm writing this, to show you people that have been in the same exact situation as me that there's certainly a way out and you're not alone.